Today we will be taking a virtual field trip on the Oregon Trail. Take a look at the map below. Do you notice anything familiar about this map below? Hopefully, you recognize Independence, Missouri. What is the Oregon Trail? It was a 2,000-mile journey west from Missouri to Oregon. It was also a promise of something better. Factors were pushing people out of the east and towards the west. Financial crises brought about a depression, disease epidemics, and religious freedom. Why do you think people would want to move away from these things? Financial crisis, which brought about a depression, meant that people were looking for jobs. Moving out west allowed people to start their own businesses where there weren't a lot already, and so they were able to pursue jobs. Disease epidemics made people scared, and so they moved out west to where there were less people. And religious freedom, where they would be under less persecution. However, it was not something to be undertaken lightly. It was a big trip, not just like packing up your car or going to the airport and flying. It was a grueling 5 to 8 month trip. Imagine being in one small vehicle, like a covered wagon, with your entire family for 5 to 8 months. 1 in every 17 people who began the trip perished along the way. It was not for the faint-hearted. They faced weather, starvation, accidents, outlaws, hostile Native Americans, and cholera. There were a lot of factors working against the people on the Oregon Trail. Where did it begin? The Oregon Trail began in the town of Independence, Missouri. Sound familiar? There they purchased much of the supplies they would need to make the journey west. In the lower left, you see a prairie schooner, or what we sometimes refer to as a covered wagon. If you'll notice, the covered wagon is covered up top by a piece of cloth. If it rained or snowed, this would not be very reliable for keeping people dry. And you notice there's no engine on this covered wagon. They would be led by mules or oxen. As you leave Independence, Missouri, you would travel through Nebraska. Upon entering the state of Nebraska, the wagon company follows the slow-moving Platte River. The silt-filled water is muddy and unfit to drink. They reach Fort Kearny, where they can purchase more supplies before continuing along the open, windy prairie. They then have to face the dangerous crossing of the Platte River. The journey would continue through Nebraska towards some of the most recognizable landmarks on the trail. Here you see pictured Courthouse Rock. Next, you would pass Chimney Rock. Why do you think people named these rock formations? Without Google Maps, it would be really hard to try to convey to people where you were going. In fact, there really weren't many maps at all. So by naming things after things that looked recognizable, you could communicate to people where we were. A rock that looked like a courthouse or a rock that looked like a chimney. You are traveling to Fort Laramie where you can get more supplies. You begin your steady climb into the Rocky Mountains. The terrain is sandy and covered with poisonous alkali springs. You keep rolling into the mountains and reach Independence Rock, the great record of the desert. There, you carve your name. Why do you think people would want to carve their name into rocks? Well, if we're being honest, there's not a lot to do on the trail. So the idea of looking for something to do probably will come in many forms. But also, you've already encountered a lot of trials and tribulations along your journey. So the fact that you've made it this far is a pretty big accomplishment. And you'd like people to know that you made it along the trail. From there, you will enter Wyoming. As you reach the Continental Divide, South Pass and the Wind River Mountains. South Pass itself is a 20-mile wide meadow that is one of the easier parts of the journey. All the rivers you cross from now on flow west to the Pacific Ocean. Why do you think it's important for travelers to know that the rivers are flowing to the Pacific Ocean? Well, the purpose of the journey was to go west, so if you get lost, you know that you can just follow a river. After moving through Wyoming, you will be traveling through Idaho. You are beginning the gentle descent into the Oregon Territory in what is now known as Idaho. Why would I say what is now known as Idaho? Since not many people had encountered the West, there weren't a lot of states as we think of them today. Most of the areas that are now states in the West were known as territories. As you enter Idaho, you reach Fort Hall, a collection of buildings and services. You'll notice, ever since we left Independence, this is really the first time I'm mentioning a building and service. It would be very important to pack everything you needed for the trip. Packing for a 5 to 8 month trip would be a very hard task. You leave the fort and begin the hazardous trail that follows the Snake River and climbs into the Blue Mountains. The trail takes you to breathtaking drops of hundreds of feet below. You must clear trees, rock sides, and dropping temperatures. You finally make it to Oregon. Once you have climbed over the Blue Mountains, you have made your reach to Fort Walla Walla. You have two choices: over the Cascade Mountains or rafting through the Columbia River. Which option would you take? No matter where you go, you're going to have some hardship. Climbing the mountains can be difficult without proper mountain gear like we think of today. Rafting the Columbia River can also be difficult, again, without all the advantages that we have of today's technology. In the Cascade Mountains, you must set out before November 1st or risk terrible snowstorms and freezing temperatures. The trail is very rough and you have to hack your way through undergrowth, avoiding rock slides and avalanches. It is very slow going, moving at only 5 miles a day. One last challenge: a section is so steep you must lower your wagon down the slope using rocks, unhitch the livestock, and unload as much weight as possible. It would be very difficult to continue to care for the animals on this journey, especially when facing treacherous areas. If you go the Columbia River, the river is wide and deceptively calm at Fort Walla Walla. So as you encounter the river, you might think initially that it would be easier than the mountain. You need to tear apart your wagon to make a raft to float the 200 miles to Fort Vancouver. Could you imagine driving in your car to a river, tearing apart your car, and then using it as a raft? And the catch is that your raft can only carry pioneers and 1,000 pounds of cargo. You'll have to make a big choice about what you actually want to take with you. Oh, and watch out for the rapids. You have finally reached Willamette Valley. It is lush and green, sprinkled with evergreens. The valley is perfect for farming. Warm summers that aren't too hot and mild winters with plenty of rain. Even though the journey was difficult, lots of people made their choices. Today you'll be doing an activity that has you considering. Would you take the trip to Oregon? Thanks for watching.